Okay, imagine this. You own a country. Great! There's only one problem. You are between two of the most aggressive countries on the entire continent, meaning that oh no! People across the pond have gained the ability to fly, and now everybody around you wants to do the same thing.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw, dang it! Aw.
Okay, now that was pretty dumbed down, but I hope you're still watching because
Today I'm not just anywhere in Poland, but I'm actually at one of the oldest permanent airfields in Europe. And just not any airfield, because it houses one of the best aviation museums in Europe, the Polish Aviation Museum. Let's go. Okay, so here's a fun question for you. What do you do if all of your neighbors start developing shiny new jets and you're the only country left sitting on a pile of Soviet scrap? That's right, you start developing the Slavic brother of the T-33A shooting star, the TS-11 Iskra. It's pretty much the first jet ever made by Poland. Okay, sure, Poland wasn't looking forward to developing the most advanced fighter jet in the world, but having developed at least one jet aircraft would look quite great on the resume. At the time, the project was a rather secretive operation because of possible interventions by the Soviet Union, but once old man Stalin died, the government could fully support this project. So in 1960, the TS-11 Iskra performed its maiden flight powered by the Armstrong-Siddeley Viper jet and proved to be quite an effective aircraft to pilot and to train on. Multiple versions were released over time, and in the 1960s, the TS-11 Iskra even took part in the competition to become Poland's main jet fighter. Unfortunately, and ironically enough for them, the Czechoslovak L-29 was chosen instead, and the dream of having a Polish trainer fighter completely shattered at that time. With the TS-11 Iskra not being chosen by the Polish government, a man named Edward wanted to continue the legacy of having a real Polish jet trainer. He decided to work on a project that should have been Polish, cheap, very easy to produce, equipped with Western avionics, equipped with Western weaponry, and export-friendly, everything that the TS-11 Iskra unfortunately failed to do. So in 1996 he began work on a project called the Iskra 2 to be a successful, version of the Iskra for the foreign market. Edward wanted to show the world that his company can also make great aircraft, unlike the big ones. So, despite his engineering challenges, eventually he made two prototypes, a military version and a civilian version. Now for the military version, the General Electric J85 engine was chosen. That's the same that's found in the G91 or the F5s, propelling this shitbox all the way up to 0.9 Mach. Now, the design basically reflected everything you would find in your modern fourth generation fighter like the MiG-29 or maybe the Hornet or, the F-15. So basically, the Polish ministry never wanted a Polish jet after all, and they continued to pursue dreams of having the F-16 that was after the MiG-29, and so the EM-10 only stayed a prototype. Speaking of the MiG-29, did you know that Poland was the biggest NATO operator of the MiG-29 as of 2008? Well, that's because most countries in Eastern Europe heavily relied on Soviet aircraft to control their airspace, and Poland was no different. I mean, after they retired the MiG-21 and MiG-23, they only had around 22 of those MiG-29s in the interceptor role to play with. Then again, 10 of those were only acquired from the Czech Republic in exchange for 11 helicopters. Good deal if you ask me, by the way. Luckily enough, later on, Eastern Germany gave around 22 MiG-29Gs to Poland, and they finally had a real fleet to work with. Eventually, it was time to upgrade this Soviet piece of junk, and all aircraft were retrofitted with domestically produced receivers and electronics, basically revamping the whole plane from somewhere around 2001 to 2005. And these flashy upgrades actually lengthened their lifespan up until 4,000 flight hours, or service life up until somewhere in 2028. Then, in 2003, it was finally time for Poland to decide upon the newest addition to the fleet. There was a competition held between the F-16, the Gripen, the MiG-29 and the Mirage 2000. Even though many experts still believe that the Gripen would have been the better choice, the F-16 was chosen and eventually introduced into the Polish service as the F-16 Goshawk. The version you see behind me is actually the East German MiG-29 GT that was upgraded to NATO standards. Do you guys remember the Super P-24 that I showed off in the Istanbul Aviation Museum? Well, this one is its predecessor, the PZL P.11. And actually, just like many other air forces in the world, Poland started off with, foreign aircraft like Breguet 14s or German biplanes. But fast forward a couple of years, and suddenly we're in 1930. And that was the year the first domestically produced fighter was ever revealed in Poland, the PWS-10. And this aircraft allowed Poland to make a whole new line of fighters from the PZL series, leading ultimately, to the PZL P.11. But unfortunately, none of these aircraft exist anymore, making this one the only and oldest Polish fighter in the world on display. And that's only because it was captured by the Germans and displayed as a war trophy in Berlin. It is an all-metal structure, a full metal covering, and of course a high-mounted gull wing. Speaking of the gull wing, did you know that the gull wing was actually invented by the Polish people? Internationally it is known as the Polish wing, but they got its name from the laughing gull because of the layout of the wings. That makes sense, doesn't it? But many nations actually adapted this design of wing, or maybe inverted versions of it, namely the Japanese B-7A, you got the American F-4U Corsair, you got the Soviet B-6, and, well, ironically enough, the German Ju-87 Stuka. Even though the PZL P.11 had superior field of vision during dogfights and two 7.92mm machine guns, unfortunately that wasn't enough, since the second half of the 1930s saw introduction of, well, the German Bf-109, outclassing the P-11 completely, and the rest is basically history. So the Poles were looking for an opportunity to have the P-11 live on and a continuous legacy down south, mainly Romania, Turkey and Bulgaria. But the British Bristol company said, nah, we forbid you any exports that use our engines. So if you want to find out how the Poles made an even better plane, managed to export it, then I would suggest you watch the video that I made about the Turkish Aviation Museum somewhere over there. Now, I know many people prefer the 5th generation fighters, their advanced stealth bombers, or maybe an airliner, but for me it's all about efficiency and simplicity. With that being said, I simply can't ignore the most produced biplane in the world, the PO2. This absolute junk box of fabric and wood is held together by hopes and prayers, and yet somehow it all worked out perfectly. You see, as Poland fell in 1939, their Air Force had to be regrouped, this time in France, near Lyon. But France fell in 1940 as well, so the Air Force had to be regrouped once more, but this time in Britain. But the pilots that decided to return to now German Soviet-occupied Poland joined the Polish People's Air Force that had a lot of Soviet aircraft lying around in their inventory. The same went for the 2nd Regiment Kraków that was equipped with the all-new PO2 LMB night bombers. The variant was slower and heavier, but it could deliver a larger payload to the enemy, which was very important, especially during the Battle of Berlin. This aircraft was built in 1944 and actually served in that squadron, and is very unique on a worldwide scale on this display.
Now, in order to cover the entire collection, I'd probably be stuck here for the next 20 business days. Instead, I'll just show you what the museum has to offer.
An IL-28, an Antonov 26, a Harrier that saw combat during the Falkland War, a whole Tu-134, a JA-37 Viggen, a J-35 Draken, an IL-10, a collection of all the MiGs and Sukhois that were in Polish service, a Supermarine Spitfire, all of the MiGs that were built under a license by Poland, and a Tu-2.